The story of how American submarines became the most feared weapon in the Pacific began not with dominance but with failure. On December 7, 1941, as Japanese planes roared over Pearl Harbor, the U.S. Asiatic Fleet's 29 submarines waited off the Philippines, untested and ill-equipped. Within hours, Admiral Thomas Hart issued one of the most consequential orders in naval history: unrestricted submarine warfare against Japan. Every Japanese vessel, merchant, military, or civilian, was now a target. But the American submarines were woefully unprepared for the brutal efficiency that order demanded. Their primary weapon, the Mark 14 torpedo, was defective. It ran too deep, exploded prematurely, or didn't explode at all. For 18 months, American submariners fired torpedoes that thudded uselessly against enemy hulls. They called it the sound of betrayal. In those early months, Japanese sailors mocked the enemy's incompetence. They believed the silent death was little more than a rumor. But war has a way of turning irony into terror. By 1943, the tide beneath the sea began to turn. Commanders in the Pacific defied Washington's bureaucrats and conducted their own secret experiments. Admiral Charles Lockwood fired torpedoes at fishing nets and cliffs, exposing the defects that official reports had denied. When the Mark 14 was fixed, the transformation was immediate and devastating. The once frustrated submariners became predators in a vast ocean filled with prey. New submarines were arriving monthly, their crews trained in night radar attacks, their commanders battle-hardened and ruthless. Convoys that once sailed confidently now found themselves stalked by invisible enemies who seemed to know their routes before they left port. And in truth, they did, thanks to Allied codebreakers who had deciphered Japanese naval communications. Every departure, every cargo manifest, every schedule was known. American submarines no longer hunted. They executed ambushes arranged by intelligence. The Japanese, trapped by their own naval arrogance, had never taken submarine warfare against commerce seriously. Protecting merchant ships was considered dishonorable, work for cowards, not warriors. Only 47 ships were assigned to convoy escort duty at the start of the war. By comparison, Britain had 400 in the Atlantic. Their depth charges were weak, set to detonate at 60 feet, while American submarines cruised comfortably below 300. Their sonar systems were primitive, their radar virtually non-existent. Japanese escort captains fought blind, their destroyers dropping charges at empty water while torpedoes found their marks again and again. As the sinkings multiplied, fear began to eclipse honor. Crews begged to be reassigned. Officers falsified routes. The words torpedo alley became synonymous with suicide. By early 1944, the destruction was staggering. The Imperial Japanese Navy's shipping capacity had dropped from 6 million tons to barely 4 million. Entire divisions meant to reinforce the Philippines, and New Guinea never arrived. American submarines had become a net that no Japanese vessel could escape. Then came the night of August 18th. Commander Munson aboard the Rasher had tracked the convoy all day, using radar to follow their lumbering silhouettes through tropical squalls. As rain pounded the sea and thunder rolled across the horizon, he positioned the submarine in their path. At 22:10 hours, he fired 2 torpedoes into the tanker Teomaru. Both struck true. The explosion was cataclysmic, a fireball that turned night into day, rising hundreds of feet into the air. The Japanese escorts panicked, dropping depth charges at random as Munson reloaded. At 23:10, he fired 6 more torpedoes at a massive troopship, the Teomaru. 3 hits tore through its hull, and within minutes, the 17,000-ton vessel was gone. Nearly 2,700 soldiers drowned as the ship disappeared beneath the storm, their screams swallowed by the sea. The carnage didn't stop there. USS Redfish torpedoed the Tayo carrier before its planes could launch, sending it to the bottom with 850 souls. The Rasher then struck again, hitting the ammunition-laden Aki Maru, whose detonation shook the submarine's hull from miles away. USS Spadefish joined the onslaught, sinking Tamatsu Maru with nearly 5,000 men aboard. By dawn, 7 Japanese ships were gone. More than 8,500 lives had been erased in 5 hours. Not a single American casualty was recorded. In the history of submarine warfare, there had never been a night like it. For the Japanese merchant fleet, it marked the beginning of the end. In Tokyo, panic rippled through the naval command. The Grand Escort Force's reports were grim. Their ships were being annihilated by unseen enemies that struck with mechanical precision. Japanese captains spoke of torpedoes that came from nowhere, of radar-guided hunters who attacked in packs and vanished before depth charges fell. The empire's maritime lifeline, the arteries that fed its army, industry, and people, was severed. Convoy HI-81 in November 1944 would fare no better. Within days, 3 escort carriers and several transports were destroyed. Thousands more soldiers and sailors were lost. By the end of that year, Japan's ability to move fuel, food, or troops by sea was collapsing. Oil reserves dwindled. Factories starved of resources. Even the mighty warships of the Imperial Navy sat idle for lack of fuel. The defeat Japan had feared would come not through invasion, but starvation. For the men who survived these sinkings, the memories never faded. Survivors spoke of the sudden deafening crack of torpedoes hitting steel, of lights dying instantly, of thousands clawing at escape ladders in darkness. They described swimming through oil-slicked seas, surrounded by the bodies of friends. Some floated for days before rescue. Others simply disappeared. These men were not just casualties of war. They were witnesses to the destruction of an empire's soul. Even decades later, Japanese merchant veterans would confess that they still dreamt of periscopes rising from black water, of torpedoes streaking toward them like ghosts in the night. By 1945, the silent hunters had done their work too well. American submarines, once desperate for targets, now roamed empty seas. The Japanese merchant fleet had been reduced to less than 2 million tons. Cities could no longer be supplied, and starvation began to spread through the homeland. When Japan finally surrendered on August 15, 1945, the empire's defeat had already been sealed months earlier, not by bombers or battleships, but by submarines. A force of barely 288 boats and 36,000 men had annihilated a nation's ability to sustain itself. Over 5 million tons of shipping lay at the bottom of the Pacific. 97,000 Japanese soldiers had drowned in transport sinkings. The United States lost 52 submarines in the campaign, a 22% casualty rate, the highest of any branch. But their success had reshaped the world's understanding of naval warfare. For Japan, the trauma endured long after the war ended. Decades later, memorials were built for the 60,000 merchant sailors who perished at sea, their names carved into stone beneath the words, "They sailed into danger, knowing death awaited them." For the men of the U.S. submarine service, there were no grand parades, only quiet remembrance. Their victories were invisible, their missions classified, their heroism buried beneath the waves. But their legacy changed warfare forever. They proved that unseen weapons could destroy not just armies, but nations. That intelligence, courage, and precision could cripple an empire more completely than any bomb ever could. As the ocean rolls endlessly over those lost convoys, their ghosts remain, a warning and a testament to the power of silence in war. The hunters beneath the sea proved that wars are not always won by those who shout the loudest, but by those who strike unseen. What do you think? Could such a campaign ever happen again in the modern age of satellite surveillance and sonar detection? Or does the ocean still hold secrets that even technology cannot touch? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this deep dive into the unseen war beneath the waves fascinated you, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more historical documentaries, and ring the bell to join us for the next story from the forgotten corners of history.